Jeff Rowe from Two Hacks Garage. Well, this is part 3 of doing the right way of engine disassembly. And when I say the right way, it's the way that Jimmy taught me. It's the way to identify, prepare, and actually take a look at what's going on with this engine as you're pulling apart. It's also a time to take a look at what parts you're going to use, which ones are bad, and start making that decision of what to keep, what not to. That being said, I have 2 totes that are full of parts I still don't know what I'm doing with. So in reality, I'm not getting rid of anything yet until I know what parts I'm going to do when I go to order them and from there. And in some cases, I tell you what, guys, there's other people out there that might need these parts. Just because I don't need them doesn't mean somebody else doesn't. So when I'm done tearing this down and all that, I'll make the decision what I need and what I don't, and I'll reach out to some people and see if they need what I don't need. That being said, in the first video, what we did was show you how to identify and prepare for an engine teardown. In the second video, well guys, what we did is all the extras on this engine before you actually get into the core of this, we took all those off. As you saw in that video, even though I was doing the right thing, I came into a situation where I broke something. As you can see on the front, I still have 2 bolts here that are broken and 1 sticking out that's stuck. We're going to address those later on when we go to remove all the plugs, freeze plugs, and oil galley plugs. Right now, I'm content with where they're at, and we will address those later, and I'll show you a pretty cool trick on how to do that. So what's this video about? Pretty simple, guys. We're going to get the rest of this torn down, so hopefully it's just a bare block where we got to remove the freeze plugs and all that jazz. But as you can see, this thing is pretty nasty. So when we got to do this, like I said in previous videos, I don't like degreasing this and spraying it down and introducing liquids down to the bottom that could potentially damage some things. I'd rather get just a little bit dirty and nasty just in case everything down below is actually in good working order. I don't want to further damage any of that. It's just a precautionary method. In my opinion, it's the right way to get these dirty and not inside that any further. So I tell you what, guys, I'm going to show you that was a mouthful, what we're up against and what we're going to do to remedy it. See you in a few. All right, guys. Well, the first step that we're going to do, because this is have a little bit of a chronological order to it, we need to get these cylinder heads off. As you can see, they're pretty nasty. In fact, a lot of those bolts you can hardly even see. So in order, especially, you know what, that one back down there. So in order to do that, we're going to have to do some scraping. So what I did was I went to the hardware store and just bought a bunch of cheap scrapers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get down in there and scrape all that gunk around the bolts. That way I can take these off. But before I do that, guys, one thing I do want to do is, even though I'm probably not going to use them, I do want to save the rocker arms and the guide plates for that and any of that hardware. I'm probably not going to use it, but I'm pretty sure once cleaned up, I know somebody that can use it. If not, I'm sure I'll find somebody. Same thing with the push rods. I'll save those too. After I get all that removed, well, the next step is we're going to get this camshaft out of here. If you look at this camshaft, really, it's not a whole lot to do it. Definitely probably not going to save this, although I will keep it as reference just in case I need to know what I need to order down the road or do some measuring. Who knows? Like I said, guys, I don't want to get rid of anything until I've got parts on order and know what I need. So once we get all the valve train off, the push rods out, cam pulled out, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the cylinder heads. That's going to be a nasty job, so just prepare for it. Like I said, we really don't degrease much when taking these apart. Don't want to introduce any harmful liquids down into the cylinders or the bottom end of the motor. So with that, guys, what we need to do is we need to get scraping around some of these bolts and get some of this stuff off here. First thing first, before we do that, we are going to remove the valve train and get that off. Because if you look, to really get the camshaft out correctly, you need to get those lifters out. In order to get the lifters out, push rod's got to come out, rocker arms got to come off. As you can see right down in there, those right against there, which would make it really hard to get that cam taken out. So when taking these engines apart, it's really a good idea to mechanically take a look at this to see what needs to come apart, when, how, and why. So with that, guys, we're going to get some rocker arms taken off. See you in a few. All right, real quick. As you saw, when we got the guide plates off, the rockers, push rods, and all that out, it's pretty disgusting, actually. It's pretty nasty, but that's fine. This is a great core engine. Can't wait to get started on building it. But as you saw when I was trying to take out these lifters, they're not actually coming through the top. The lifter bores are so gummed up and everything is so nasty, they're not coming out. I don't want to force it. I don't want to hurt anything. I haven't inspected them yet. So what I was able to do was just push them up until they kind of slippery, gunky, got nasty, stuck in these positions. They do go back down this way okay. So as long as it's off the camshaft, I'll be all right. So the next step, guys, yeah, you can see this is just gross. So as long as it's off the camshaft and all that, we should be okay to get this cam out. So yeah, that's the next step we're going to do. Jeffrey and I, my son's helping me. He's Jeff number 3 out of the 3 Jeffs. We're going to get the timing gear and all that stuff off. And then we can get this camshaft out. And then we can remove the heads. See you in a minute. Pretty nasty, guys. Well, as you saw, we got the cam out and all that. It was kind of gunked. It's just what happens with these old engines when they're not maintained right and just run bad. Small gear motor, tearing something like this apart with a lot of miles, this is to be expected. I did want to say something, though. If you're working on an engine that you don't know if you're going to save the old cam and lifters or whatever, in some cases people do that. I get it. You will want to make sure when you take your camshaft out that your lifters here, you're going to put in a box in the same order as they are here. Because with hydraulic camshafts, those lifters have to be matched to the lobe from which it was from the factory. So that's just a quick tip. I, however, knew I wasn't going to be using this camshaft or those old hydraulic lifters, so I just pulled them out. But if you need to or keep those, always make sure you have them in the same order as to which lobe they were on the camshaft. So yeah, as you can see, got that off. Next step is we got to do a whole lot of scraping in here, get these heads off. See you soon. All right, well, we got the heads off. One of them fought us. The other one, not so much. As you can see, I did use power tools on that. I say I don't, and I don't like to, but I got the head bolts backed off to a point where they were literally finger loose, and I had my son, just for time's sake, slowly back those out, which was fine. However, one up in here, I did not do that with. It was completely tight. As you can see, what I'm up against here, yeah, it's pretty nasty. This is definitely a core engine. Yeah, it's pretty gross. A little bit of ridge, but not bad. What we got to do next, guys, is we got to get the cylinders kind of sprayed down the little WD by those rings. I know it turns over free, but we got to pop these pistons off. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to take the oil pan off from the bottom instead of flipping it over. That way any oil can be dripped down instead of dripping back on the other side. Let me show you something on the heads here real quick, guys. These heads have seen some major nasty years of running. This one's pretty bad. But as you can see here, it's rusty in there, especially this cylinder. That got exposed to some moisture. You see that one's actually flaking off. So yeah, if you were actually going to be reusing these heads, you would definitely need to get them surfaced, valve job, you name it, and actually new valves. Sorry if that was quiet for a second there. But yeah, you would have to resurface these heads, which is a good idea anyway. Just like that block, you can actually feel across it. There's high spots, low spots. So yeah, as I'm taking this apart, I'm taking a note. Even though I'm not using these heads, if I were to, complete valve job on these, hot tank them, new valves, new springs, new seats, you name it. Same thing with this block. This block, we're going to show you how to clean it, but this is definitely a candidate for a hot tank. But yeah, this would need to be surfaced also, which I'm taking notes. So you know what, guys, this one will get surfaced. See you in a few. All right, well, you see you got the oil pan off, windage tray, and all that type of fun jazz. Little tip here, guys. You want to remove your pistons and rods and all that first before loosening your main caps. One thing you do want to do is on the bottom of the pistons, connecting rods itself, if there's no numbers there, if you're going to save these rods and reuse them, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take like a machinist punch that has the numbers on it and punch the numbers per the cylinder on there. So whatever your cylinder order is, like 1357, 2468, you would want to punch those numbers in there so you know which connecting rod goes back into which hole. I'm not going to do that because I have other plans where I'm not going to use these rods. So next step is, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to get these pistons and connecting rods out and then get the crankshaft out. See you in a few. By the way, guys, when doing this, you see how those connecting rod bolts are on there like that? So when you go to drive these out, you're going to take the caps out. You're going to slightly tap on these caps once you take the nuts off to kind of separate them. Sometimes you can get on there and just pop them. There's a couple different methods you can do. My advice on this, you just got to be careful. Because what you don't want to do is when you take these out, you don't want the actual connecting rod bolts to hit the cylinder walls. That can scar it up even worse. Yeah, I know this is going to get machined, but in your application, who knows? Maybe you got a good cylinder and you don't want to get it scarred up. You can put rubber tubing over it, all kinds of different things to protect those walls on there, but just take your time, be careful to remove these caps and take your time of popping those out. What I like to do is put a dowel straight down in there, like a wooden dowel, something like that, little piece of pipe, tap on the bottom to remove these once the caps are off. We're going to throw it on time lapse and show that. But yeah, I just wanted to say when you're taking your connecting rod caps off, you want to be careful. By the way, guys, you want to match up the connecting rod cap with the connecting rod that it came from. Seeing that these aren't numbered on this, what we're going to do as we take them off, we're going to put the cap back on the connecting rod with the nuts that came with it and put them on there. See you soon, guys. All right, guys, well, we got the pistons out. As you can see, we took good care to make sure that the rod and connecting rod bolts weren't hitting the crankshaft journals because that can nick and damage it, and we're hitting cylinder walls. You just got to be careful. Usually if something wood prevents that damage when you're getting those out. So the next step, guys, is we got to get this crankshaft out. But before you get the crankshaft out, it's always a good idea to kind of look at the journals on it. And I did see some wear on here. That's typical with a whole bunch of miles. I'm going to further inspect this once it's out because it's probably a good crank. Reason I know that is, well, there's numbers on here and casting numbers. This happens to be an 813N, which is actually a good, desirable crankshaft for these Pontiac 400s. I know I'm not going to use it, but I don't want to damage it. What we need to do is get it out. Main caps. You don't want to go beating on these to get them off. Kind of what we do is we tap each side and pull them up nice and carefully and rotate that over. But this is the point, guys, when you're pulling your connecting rods and everything out, to check the bearings, look for wear, look at your casting numbers, and go from there. It'll tell you a lot. There's a whole lot of videos on there like to look at actual wear on bearings. The bearings on all these pistons were pretty shot. The wear on the crankshaft wasn't as bad as I thought. However, in this case, it just wouldn't get polished. This would actually get turned like, 10 thousandths under. But with that, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to get these main caps off and we're going to get the crankshaft out. See you in a few. All right, well, everything is apart. One thing I did want to say, like I said, the connecting rods themselves weren't marked. You can actually use a little machinist punch. It's got the numbers on it. It's like a die, and you can actually punch the numbers in those. However, that being said, if you look at the main caps on this, just like most other engines, they are numbered, so that's always good to go. You don't want to ever mix these up, and in this case, I don't have to worry because they are cast in there where they go. That's a quick little tip there. Just always make sure you keep your mains in order, and always make sure if your connecting rods are not labeled, label them. Whew. Well, that was a gross, nasty job. Like I said, being in this video, this is where you get down the nitty gritty and you get pretty well gross and dirty. Scraping, getting all that. Like I said, it's better to get dirty than introduce more liquids that could be harmful to the internals on this. In this case, it really didn't matter. At the end of this video, you saw we got the crank out, mains, and everything like that out. That's where you want to inspect your bearings, inspect your crank. I went over that and I looked at stuff, and you can actually take your fingernail and feel on there. And if you feel any high spots or feel it catching, you know your crank has some issues. On this one, I definitely felt it. Also with the bearings were extremely wore. You could actually see in there where it got past the metal and was getting down the copper. This engine had some oiling problems, you could obviously tell, and that was not allowing oil to get to the mains or the rod bearings. And you know what, guys, ended up hurting it. If I was to save this crank, which I am going to keep, it's a good crank. Like I said, it's the in-cast crank, which is somewhat desirable for the Pontiac 400s. If I was to keep this, which I'm going to, like I said, and reuse it, I would have this taken to a machine shop and have them turn it down appropriately. The rods itself, they're not bad, but you want to do a little bit more final inspection on them. I did notice when I was taking these bolts loose, some of the mains actually felt a whole lot looser than the other ones. Same with the rod caps. That right there can spell trouble. That right there can spell trouble, especially for the connecting rods. Because if they were somewhat loose, those things are hitting like this and it can take them out of round. That's where you would need to go to a machine shop and get them resized. If you resize one, you might as well resize all of them. You just got to be careful on that, because the more you resize, the more you're going to put that piston down in the hole, because it actually does slightly shorten that. So with that, guys, the next video you're going to see, what we're going to do is we're going to get all the little plugs out, the freeze plugs out and all that, and get it down to an actual bare block. We're really close. As you can see, we still got some bolts to address on that. I'm going to try a trick that shows you that involves heat and candle wax to do that. If not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it up to Jimmy to show you how to get that out using a lot more heat. But yeah, guys, overall, this is where we're at. Pretty much a bare block right now. You can inspect your cylinders, your lifter bores, check all of that here now before you start making the decision to move forward. It's always good also after you clean this to have one magnafluxed, but you can visually inspect things and see if things are bad. Now, after looking at this, I did notice these pistons were stock. It is a standard bore, so that for me is a very good starting point. I like to start with blocks that are a standard bore, not taken over to the max. I want to get the most life out of this, and having that standard bore really does make a huge difference. Oh, one other thing on this, if you don't know what crankshaft you have and you think it's forged or cast, you can actually take a hammer, and when the crank's sitting up, just tap on the crank itself, not on the journals, but on the big crank or the crankshaft counterweights. Tap it with a hammer. If it's like more of a thud, it's cast. But if it's more of a ring, that's forged. There's also some stamping marks on there you can see with that. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of videos on YouTube on that, but this is more or less on the disassembly of engines. So you've seen us go through all of that. We're getting much closer, guys, to our end goal. We still have a lot of cleaning to do. Got to get some miscellaneous things out of here. And one thing that we are going to do is once this is cleaned up as much junk as we can off this, we're actually going to show you an electrolysis process that helps pull rust out of it. With that, guys, I have a whole lot of cleaning to do. It's nasty. It's gross. This thing stinks. It's been a long day. It's been a long night. I got to go get something to eat. Tell you what, guys, till the next episode, you stay rowdy, my friends. Later.